July 17, 1976, the 21st Olympiad opened.
It's been almost 50 years since Montreal hosted the greatest show on Earth, one of the most spectacular Olympic parks ever attempted. At the centre of it all was the iconic Olympic Stadium, a venue that's gone on to have quite a unique story. With an ambitious design to put Montreal on the map while bringing pride back to the Games after the troubles of '72, there was a lot at stake to get things right. This would become the largest sporting event in Canadian history, part of Mayor Jean Drapeau's plan to turn the former capital into a world-class city. With the successful Expo 67 fresh in the memory, Drapeau was confident of pulling off another big show when the news was announced in 1970.
With the cooperation now of all the people all over Canada, 1976 Games will be a terrific success.
But its construction went on to become one of the biggest debacles in sporting history, followed by decades of major failures. Now, the city is embarking on a massive and very expensive renovation to put these issues to bed forever. Montreal might finally be getting the stadium it dreamed of half a century ago. The question is, would they be better off without it? It's 1972, and Montreal has just 4 years to get Canada ready for its first, and so far only, Summer Olympics. Drapeau desperately needed ideas for the Olympic Park, with its all-important centrepiece that every Games must have, the main stadium. Working with a very optimistic budget of 120 million Canadian dollars for the entire event, the hunt began for an architect who could design something suitably ambitious. I say hunt, that might not be the right word, because there was only ever one candidate for the job. Meet Roger Talabert, who at the time had just finished redesigning Parc de France, now home of French football club Paris Saint-Germain. Together, Talabert and Drapeau took charge of managing the project, more or less by themselves. And 2 years after the announcement, Canadians got a first sight of their future Olympic stadium. With a capacity of 73,000, now reduced to 56,000, it's shaped like an enormous round shell with an opening in the centre. No points for guessing why it would go on to be nicknamed the Big O. Now, granted, a stadium being round isn't exactly groundbreaking. But what made Montreal's really stand out was this huge structure sprouting from one end. 165 metres high with a 45-degree lean, this still holds the record as the world's tallest inclined tower. But if you think that's just for show, then you're wrong. As well as providing training facilities for athletes during the Games, the tower was designed to carry the weight of the stadium's retractable roof via a series of cables. In 1973, construction teams began work on the excavation. Over 8 months, more than 2 million cubic metres of clay and limestone were removed from the ground, enough to fill 850 Olympic-sized pools. By 1975, the base of the tower was emerging, along with the vertical beams that connect the foundations to the main support structures. These were cast in place on site and formed the basis for the 38 console sections. Their job was to create the so-called rib cage of the stadium. Made from 1,500 prefabricated elements, each console was completely unique, joining together around the technical ring in the centre of the venue. It might look like just a rim for the roof, but this ring is a bit more than that, because inside it is where you're going to find the stadium's lighting and ventilation equipment. Everything seemed to be going swimmingly in the early stages, but this project was about to hit some big hurdles. In May 1975, the workers went on strike over wages, labour disputes, and the supposed mismanagement of the project. The situation took 5 months to resolve. At this point, construction had fallen way behind, and it was going to take a monumental effort to complete the build in time for the Games, which were now less than a year away. Frustrated by how badly things were going, the provincial government stepped in to take control of the project. And if working conditions were tough before the strikes, things really ramped up afterwards. Activity on the site was virtually non-stop to make up for the delays, with everyone working at full capacity in a Herculean effort to make sure that Montreal's Olympics went down in history for all the right reasons.
There we are being forced to work night and day to finish before the deadline. And why is that? Because of manpower, slowdowns, union intervention, and many other things.
Even on the day of the opening ceremony, construction workers were still there clearing away building debris. And yet, In spite of all those delays, somehow the Games went ahead. But there was something noticeably missing. Well, two things in fact. That record-breaking tower was nowhere to be seen. There was only a sort of stump where it was supposed to stand. And with nothing to hold it up, that meant there was no roof. While enough was done for the stadium to function, Chapleau and Talibert's grand vision had sadly missed its big moment. As for the Games itself, there were memorable highlights. The first ever perfect 10 score in gymnastics, Princess Anne competing in the equestrian, and Caitlyn Jenner breaking the decathlon world records. But when it was all over, Montreal woke up with the mother of all Olympic hangovers. Not only did it have an unfinished stadium, but it still had to pay to pick up the tab. And that original estimate for the construction costs turned out to be way off. The final figure for the building soared to an eye-watering $1 billion Canadian dollars, by far the biggest chunk of the overall bill for the Games, which in total came in at around $1.5 billion. It was quite the opposite of what Chapleau had famously declared after his city's successful bid, when people were already questioning the numbers. He said back then, the Montreal Olympics can no more have a deficit than a man can have a baby. That was awkward. So why did it increase so much? Well, there's a few reasons. Firstly, the unique design made it more technically challenging to execute than initially thought, and a rise in material costs due to the 1973 oil crisis didn't exactly help things. Then they had to account for all that overtime for the workers who toiled away day and night to get the stadium ready, or at least into an acceptable position for the Games. And to top it all off, there were a series of corruption scandals that only came fully to light in the 80s. But the city did in fact manage to settle this mountain of debt in 2006, a full 30 years after the Olympics.
A fabulous stadium, but I think it cost more than all of the covered stadia in North America put together.
Quebec's government brought in a tobacco tax and extended its national lottery scheme to help with the repayments. Projects like major infrastructure upgrades were put on hold. According to one report, a $2.8 billion post-Olympic transport plan was shelved as a result of the mounting costs. Now, if you're assuming that the subsequent decades must have been pretty uneventful in comparison, then think again. Don't forget, they still hadn't finished building this stadium. A further 11 years were spent completing the roof and tower, and none of that was easy. Not long before it opened, the tower caught fire. Then, when the Kevlar roof was used for the first time, it ripped. It became a recurring problem until the early 90s, when the decision was made to stop opening it. And so the roof was replaced with a fiberglass one 7 years later. Oh, and let's not forget September 1991, when the support beams suddenly failed, sending 55 tons of concrete crashing to the floor, luckily with no one underneath. Largely due to these issues, and the fact that it was often unusable during cold weather, which Canada tends to get pretty regularly, the stadium was struggling to hold down any long-term tenants. Yes, it was converted into a baseball stadium after the Games, but its size, shape and playing service made it unpopular with fans and players alike. There have been football games here too, and concerts from the like of Pink Floyd and Metallica, but the place hasn't had the frequency of use you'd expect from a venue that cost as much as it did, and that's been around for this long. The same goes for the tower. Many people over the years have enjoyed the one-of-a-kind funicular that takes you up to the observatory, offering stunning views of the city. But the inside of the structure remained vacant until 2017, when it was converted into offices. And now the public spaces are closed for renovation. You can understand then why not everyone in Montreal is a big fan of the Big O.
Tell me what you think about the Olympic Stadium.
It's a big toilet.
But now it's been fully paid off, is it time to stop ridiculing, stop calling it a money pit, or referring to it by its other nickname, the Big O? Unfortunately, those aliases probably aren't going to be going anywhere for a while yet, because the building is now set for another massive round of funding. A further $870 million is being forked out, and guess what? It's going on the roof. The idea this time is to fix it once and for all, and we mean that literally. It's going to be rigid and fixed in place, set within a transparent glass hoop. No more materials that can tear or collapse. Time to stick a solid cover on it and not have to worry about even more problems in the future. But even if you don't have hundreds of millions of dollars riding on your mathematical skills, it's important to keep your mind sharp, and that is where Brilliant comes in. These guys offer thousands of interactive courses in things like maths, science, programming, data analysis, and even AI. But what I really love about Brilliant is that you learn through problem solving. That really works for me, it's just how I've always picked things up. But it's also proven to be 6 times more effective than just watching hours of lecture videos. That really comes across in their new visual algebra course, which takes these sometimes quite abstract concepts and makes them visually understandable and just makes them really click. And don't worry, if like me you don't have much time, you can put in just a few minutes each day and still improve your critical thinking skills. Guys, to try Brilliant for free, you can head over to brilliant.org/the B1M, scan the QR code on screen right now, or head to the link that's down there in the video description. You're also going to get 20% off an annual premium subscription. Now, working with fantastic video sponsors like Brilliant helps us continue making great content for you guys, so please do go and check them out, we'd really appreciate it. Now, let's get back to Montreal and find out what's next for the Big O. So when are things going to get started? Well, works have already begun. In 2024, the covering was removed, opening the stadium to the elements once again, at least for the time being. 2026 will see the new roof pieced together on the ground using temporary supports before it's lifted into the air. Through a system of mega jacks, the structure is going to be raised to around 50 metres and held there for 2 months. That is when the installation is going to take place, including reattaching the cables that connect the roof to the tower. If that all goes well, then the stadium can reopen to the public in 2028. So when it is up and running again, and there are no more problems with that pesky roof, the plan is to be using it more regularly for events, which means there's a lot to be hopeful for. You see, Montreal's missed out on a fair bit of action. They were originally considered a potential venue for the 2026 FIFA World Cup, but they had to withdraw, partly because of the cost of upgrading the stadium, which would just be too much at that point. They also missed out on the chance to be a stop on Taylor Swift's highest grossing tour of all time, again mostly down to the state of the stadium. But when the stadium does become fit for purpose again, the theory is that it's going to be in a much better place to take these opportunities instead of having to pass on them. In fact, the local authority has said the upgrades could see the venue bring in as much as $1.5 billion over 10 years. It would do this by hosting large events regularly and welcoming more tourists to the site than it already does.
The provincial government hopes to increase the number of events here from 20 to more than 50 a year.
Of course, there is another drastic option that springs to mind when considering what to do with this place. And you're probably already asking this question in the comments. Why not just demolish it and stop it becoming an even bigger financial burden? Well, the cost of knocking it down is thought to be even more expensive than improving it. The province has quoted a figure of up to $2 billion. That's partly because it sits above a metro and couldn't be demolished using regular methods like explosives. Those ribs we showed you earlier were built using pre-stressed concrete reinforced with high-tension steel cables. So they'd have to be taken apart very carefully, and that doesn't come cheap. You can see then why the choice was made to not just keep it, but to give this historic building one last revamp. But there really is a feeling that this time there can't be any more slip-ups. The legacies of Olympic stadiums have been a big talking point for many years, and Montreal's really is no exception. Few construction projects have gone so wildly over budget and struggled to serve a valuable purpose across such a lengthy time frame. But there's no denying that objectively it's a thing of beauty, and perhaps Montreal should be applauded for its efforts to maintain it despite the opposition. Now it's being given the chance to prove its worth for good, and to become a landmark that this city can at last be truly proud of. Guys, don't forget to go and check out that link down there in the description. If you brush up on your math skills with Brilliant, maybe one day you too could design an iconic stadium like this. Don't forget that we're inspiring the next generation of skyscraper builders through our investment into Brickborrow, a fantastic Lego subscription service. You can learn more and get started today over at brickborrow.com. And as always guys, if you enjoyed this video and you want to get more from the definitive video channel for construction, make sure you're subscribed to the B1M.